This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes. Happy to be here on this absolutely gorgeous Friday in Salt Lake City. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. And I'm sure you won't be shocked about this, but I have been a very busy lady. And I have been spending a lot of my time talking to people that are very relevant to this field and people that have offered me insight into not only what's going on in Utah, specifically at Skinwalker Ranch, but also with researching the phenomena. I talked to Greg Bishop, who has been on my show before. He's an author. I absolutely adore him. I think he's so spicy. I just love that guy. I have also spent time talking to other people, and they're going to be on the show coming up in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned. Make sure you find me on Facebook. Go to ufoclassified.com, and most of all, tell all of your friends about this show, because it is my hope that I can give you every week something that you can learn from and kind of push you in a good direction so you can really get a handle on what we're dealing with, which, that's the kind of the million-dollar question there. With so many organizations and lecturers, authors who give all of us information that is questionable, it is imperative that we find good resources, and that is my goal with UFO Classified, to give you people of merit. My guest tonight is somebody that I have been absolutely dying to get on my show because of what he has done to put Skinwalker Ranch on the map. Zack Van Eyck is a television writer, director, producer, and in my opinion, most notably, but he might feel differently, he was a journalist and writer for the Deseret News, which is a Utah newspaper that actually does really groundbreaking work, not only on Skinwalker Ranch, but on Dugway. And I am a big fan of the Deseret News. But way back when Zack, he's going to tell us about this, he got in contact with the Shermans who owned Skinwalker Ranch. And that meeting and the story that turned into many stories that he wrote really put Skinwalker Ranch on the map and highlighted the fact that Utah is an incredibly significant place with very, very bizarre activity taking place that deserves scientific research. And from what I hear, that's taking place right at the moment. So I'm excited to have Zack on the show. He has 50 professional credits in a Hollywood career, and that began after a 20-year career as an award-winning investigative news journalist. In the field of paranormal research, Zack is best known for his articles on the 1993-94 northern New Mexico cattle mutilations for the Santa Fe New Mexican, and is the reporter who, of course, broke my favorite story for the Deseret News. The ranch articles introduced the world to the flying blue orbs that terrorized the Shermans and their livestock, and reduced 3 pets to a pile of ash and goo. His stories caught the attention of the Las Vegas entrepreneur, very eccentric man, Robert Bigelow, who purchased the ranch and set up a scientific research project. Much to my dismay, we've not really seen the fruits of that in the public domain, but perhaps that will change. He is right now working on a script, The Devil's Ranch, and we're going to be joined by his partner later tonight. And I want to just get him on because I can't even, Zach, seriously, you can tell me the rest of your bio. Tell us the rest of your bio, but you're so freaking fantastic. You have done so much, and honestly, I am just blown away that you're here tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. And here's the thing: 1 month, 21 years ago, in June of '96, and I can't believe it was that long ago, was when I was out on the ranch with Terry and Gwen Sherman and hearing all of their fantastic stories. Now, that was probably, as far as journalism goes, that story obviously is the biggest one of my career. But prior to that, and none of that would have happened. We wouldn't have found out about the Sherman Ranch, at least not in the same way, if I hadn't been working in New Mexico prior to that and covering all of the cattle mutilations down there. And I actually, and I'll give you this whenever you'd like it, but I found a little tidbit of story from New Mexico that happened in '94 involving a cow and a beam, which is similar to things that have gone on elsewhere. But in New Mexico, just to give you a quick background, I was at the New Mexican for 2 years, and I was, 3 years actually, I was assistant sports editor. And then they switched me over to Enterprise reporter, which was fun. So I got to they would let me go for a month and just focus on whatever they wanted me to focus on. So 1 month, it was about hunger. And I did so many stories about all the starving, especially elderly people in northern New Mexico, and it really opened your eyes. And the other issue that was going on at that time that we learned about through that and other means was that these smaller ranchers, in northern New Mexico around Santa Fe, it's mostly small ranchers, and they have small herds. And so if they lose one cow to something weird like a cattle mutilation, it's a big deal because it really hurts them in the pocketbook. So we were covering it from that standpoint and looking at it, what's the government doing? Are they doing anything? There was a former FBI investigator, Rommel was his last name, and in 1980, because there were things going on in the 70s, in 1980, he was hired, and he put out a conclusion basically that all of the cattle mutilations were due to, flies and predators and other animals, and just pretty much nonsense. But then the reports kind of died down because that was an official New Mexico allegedly report. So who do you report it to? Well, 10 years had gone by and it was still going on, and so these ranchers, it's like, who do we talk to? And so we were basically at the New Mexican. We were their voice, and those series of articles, a lot of attention. Linda Moulton Howe was very involved too, and a lot of other people at the time. Ted Bonnet, I met him at the time. So there was all this crazy stuff going on in New Mexico. And then, in '94, those articles came out mostly, it was 94, 93, 94, there was a lot going on. And then I got a job at the Deseret News and had to take it because it was better money. And I went up there, and, it's not far from New Mexico. And I told them first thing, and they were pretty receptive. I'm like, look, I've covered this down there. I'm sure you got stuff going on here. If you ever want me to look into it, let me know. Well, it took about a year and a half before they warmed up to it. But the timing was good because it was the summer of '96 when Independence Day was coming out. And finally, my editors went to me and they said, hey, because they like to localize stuff. So they're like, well, this big movie's coming out. Maybe now you could take a look and see if there's anything going on locally. And I'm like, all right, because I had basically spent, well, you knew Mildred Beasley, right?
Yes.
I love Mildred. She was in her 80s, of course, when I moved to Utah. But I started out covering the suburbs, and she lived over, I think, in Cottonwood, and I was covering like Mill Creek, that area. So it was great because on my daily assignments, I could run over and talk to Mildred. So I went over and visited her a few times, and she told me about, Frank Salisbury, and I got a copy of his book, The Utah UFO Display, which is amazing, of course. I'm sure you've talked about that.
Yes.
And I showed my editors, I'm like, well, look, here's a book chronicling 400 cases that were happening, just 2 hours away. And I love that book because, in Junior Hicks's research, and of course, Junior is the junior high school science teacher out in the Uinta Basin that everybody would come to and give reports. And Junior had 400 reports in the 60s and 70s up to 75, and 7 of them involved people seeing a being inside or outside of a craft. So I thought all that was amazing. And I, as a reporter, was pretty much ready to pull the trigger, whenever they wanted me to. And so I started writing some of the stuff that I already knew about and contacting those people. And it was, and we were going to do a series of articles, but I felt like there was more. And I had talked to Junior Hicks before, and so I called him again and we talked. And it's one of those things where you look back as a reporter, and, I never went to journalism school. I just happened to be a lucky situation as a sports writer. When I was 14, I was working for a baseball team in Alaska, and they asked me to call in the scores, and I wrote up some stuff. And before I knew it, I had a job when I was 14, so I really didn't know much about journalism. I just had to figure it out on my own. But one of the most important things, of course, is follow-up questions. And so Junior Hicks and I had talked on the phone, and of course this was 21 years ago, and Junior's still around. I think he may be close to 90 now. But Junior's awesome. He was the go-to guy for so long, and so he was telling me a lot of stories. And we were talking. I said, Junior, I've got so much, and it's so interesting, and I'm really excited about this. But is there anything? Is there anything happening now? I mean, all this has happened in the past. What's going on now? And so Junior paused for a bit, and he said, well, you might want to call Gwen down at the bank. And that's how it all started. And I talked to Gwen, and the timing was really fortunate because at that time, they'd been there for about 22 months total. I think 20 months at that time. And Terry had already made some efforts to try to sell it or looked into it. One family was interested. He's not going to sell the ranch to a family. There was a hunting club. He didn't think that was a good idea. So Terry was kind of stuck because Terry had been through this, and when people read our script, they go, "Oh, it's not realistic because this family would have left the ranch." I'm like, well, yeah, but no, you don't know Terry. I mean, he'd invested all this money, and he was hybridizing these Angus cattle that he'd gone to school. He's from Arizona. I believe he went to Washington State for animal husbandry. So he was really into it and was developing a hybrid strain of Angus, and those were the only cows that were affected, by the way. So that's interesting.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, so, it was a good situation because I had just covered all this stuff in New Mexico, and I had literally, I think I still have it, a file with 11 pages of phone numbers of people, ranchers, abduction experiencers, everyone you can imagine. And Terry and Gwen didn't have access to all this. I mean, they talked to Junior, which was great because Junior could tell, oh, yeah, you're not alone. They talked to the local Indians. They knew things had happened in the past, but there really wasn't, a lot of help for them. And so I gave them everything I had and, put them in touch. I don't know how it happened, but through Linda, and Linda was working for Robert Bigelow at the time. I told the Shermans, I said, look, I think Robert Bigelow is going to want to buy this ranch from you. So my trade-off with them was, look, let me tell your story. And Terry told me, we're not going to tell you everything because people are not going to believe everything. And I said, that's fine. You tell me what you can tell me. And believe me, what they told me was enough for the initial story. And I said, look, in return, I'm going to get you connections and we're going to see if we can get you guys off the ranch because you shouldn't stay. You shouldn't stay. Right. And I knew what Bigelow would want to do. I mean, because we knew that he was putting money into this and he'd already formed National Institute for Discovery Science, which has since been shut down, and their big project really was the ranch. But out there, and we'll go into more detail. But really, it was like watching a kettle to see if it would boil. And that's kind of why they're not as active now, I think, because they really did spend a lot of time out there. And I don't think they got a whole lot. But I think the story would have come out eventually, Erica. But I think the way it came out was beneficial. It was the best case scenario for the Shermans, I think, because even though, again, they got some publicity that, brought some weird people out there and they had to deal with it, but they already had plenty of weirdness. And at least they had some support, but they also had a lot of people who wanted to talk to them. And when Bigelow did buy the ranch, because he flew out a couple of weeks after our article. And of course, the other thing is, when I found out about the Shermans and I did all this interviewing, I let other people know in the field that, look, my story's going to come out on, I think it was the 30th, or did it? Yeah, I think it came out June 30th. And so as soon as that came out, Linda Moulton Howe, Ted Bonnet, Chris O'Brien, David Perkins, Ryan Layton, I think had already talked to them, but people in the field, were then like going in on the story and trying to get there. So all of them pretty much talked to Terry and Gwen over the next couple months or so. And then by the time Bigelow got in, as he kind of shut them down with a gag order and said, you have a non-disclosure agreement now. And I don't know if that's still in effect. It probably is. The Shermans were done. They didn't really want to talk about it anymore anyway. And I've been following it, for the last 21 years, and not much has been happening supposedly lately. But I tell you, it's interesting. There's, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a YouTube clip with John Alexander being interviewed from 2013. And It looks like, yeah, it's a nicely done PR piece, I think, to sort of kind of calm nerves and make people, aware that, look, we're telling you what we're going to tell you, but we don't know. We don't have any answers. And, it's that group, it's interesting because I really think Bigelow's interest, his grandparents saw a UFO when he was a kid, and he was interested, and he grew up in Vegas. He was interested for that reason. But he's always been interested, obviously, now that he's building space stations. He's been interested in finding out if alien technology was available for use for himself, for his company, to fly into space. Is there something that's available? So he's essentially, I feel like he's looking to back engineer, just like allegedly the government has been doing,
Absolutely.
So I think that's his interest. But, I interviewed him, went down to Vegas, interviewed him. I have the story over here. I think it was 98, though. It was a little bit later. And I just thought he was great. And, he's a businessman, and he's tight-lipped, and he's tight with his money, but he's very determined, and he is who he is. He's no one to fear, but he has his own ways of doing things. For example, I thought it was interesting. You've seen this, I'm sure. There's something that somebody had posted from the Planning Commission or whatever it is out there, and you went it from last summer, where the new owners, or whatever this company is that he has that now owns it, it's still Bigelow, but they were trying to vacate the road. They were trying to, because they've already got the fence up, right? And I guess it's supposedly a state road or something, and they're trying to do the formal process to vacate it. Whereas Bigelow himself, he just put the fence over it. He's, that's him. That's it. He's just going to do stuff. He's not going to
wait for
permission, And that's how you become a billionaire, by the way. But I think most of the information out there now, they're not going to give you the speculation. I'll give you plenty of speculation. They're not going to do it. But do they know more? Do they have a better idea of what's going on? Of course they do. Of course they do. But something that Bob mentioned to me in the interview in 98 that he was very concerned about, and I know there are people who are unsure about this, whether it would really be a big deal or not, but the issue is disclosure, and are we ready, is the public ready to really understand what alien contact is all about? And there's some who feel like that's a joke, but as you dig into this and you realize how complex it really is, then you understand why the government is denying it all, because it really is a lot to handle. And it's tough to fit the Sherman Ranch story into 2 hours. Allegedly, there's so much going on out there, Erica. I don't know when our government would be in a position to really handle it. I think what's going to happen is everything else is going to be overwhelming. I feel like we're already at that stage to some point, those of us who are aware, where, there's so much information, there's channeled information coming into, it's just all over the place, that we as humanity, as we grow and evolve, we're not dependent upon our government to tell us what's going on. We're finding out ourselves. And we can understand, though, if in fact, okay, let's speculate wildly here, okay? So if what's going on at the Sherman Ranch and everywhere else is, alien extraterrestrials or extra-dimensional, or maybe it's time travel, who knows, that's, of course, in our script. But if they are out there doing something with, harvesting genetic material, and of course, Linda Moulton Howe is the expert on this, and she's been doing what I did for a while. She's been doing it for 40 years, so she's awesome, or 35. She's really amazing. But, it's just amazing. How could the government really, or anyone official, say, oh, yeah, we got a bunch of aliens out there, and they're like harvesting people and abducting people, and they're using our genetics because they're trying to survive, and they're trying to replicate their own bodies, and we're aware of it, and we really don't have any control, and we can't do anything. We're all defenseless, and we're kind of at their mercy, and we're kind of their guinea pigs. Sorry, are you going to,
Oh, yeah, no, it's absolutely frightening, but then I have to wonder, are they trying to dumb us down because this would help us access our greatest potential, which, there's so many sides to this. What are the ulterior motives? And of course, it's complex, it's deep, and I think that there are different people in the government that have different motivations for doing what they're doing.
Well, and I think there's so many different beings, too, with different agendas that we're talking about who may be, if you look at the variety of the craft, the beings, you've got everything from reptile types to Nordics. It's just, if there are lots of other planets and potentially dimensions that exist, right next door, and there's so much angular stuff too with all this, Erica, and elements, I think, of time travel, which is why we've included it in our film. And let me just cut to the chase there. I think the one event, and this is much later, this is when NIDS was there, and this is the event that NIDS talks about. As their only real evidence. They had a cattle mute that they looked at, but that's been done before. But they had the cameras out there, and apparently 4 cameras on platforms throughout the pasture, and each camera could see one another. So camera 1 could see camera 2, for example. So camera 2 suddenly it was shut off, and it happened like in a second, because you can look from the other camera, and I guess they said it was 1.3 seconds per frame. So in one frame, you see the camera, 100 yards away, but it looks normal, and it's got all of its PVC piping and its wiring and everything, and the duct tape, and it's holding it together is all there. And then in 1.3 seconds, the next frame, it is all gone. And so when they went and looked at it, yeah, a lot of it was just gone. Like the duct tape just disappeared. And that was it. And it was in its 1.3 seconds. So either to me, and the other thing was the cattle were right underneath that platform, and the cattle will always scatter if a human or anyone else comes near them. And of course, these little red balls were like hurting the cattle, and they were running from them. So my point is, I don't think the cattle saw anything. So was it time manipulation, or is it angular space manipulation? And if so, it has to involve time too, because how are you going to do that in 1.3 seconds? So that's why our film, The Shenandoah Experiment, which we're doing this summer as a prelude to the Sherman Ranch story, does include time travel. Now it's fiction, but I think it's fun to explore in that way, and it gives us the ability to ask a lot of questions. And who knows? I mean, I'm not going to rule out time travel as a possibility, or at least that maybe what these other dimensions are, maybe it does somehow connect with time, because out at the ranch, a lot of this happened after the fact, but and is included in Colm Kelleher's and George Knapp's book. But there was sort of a velociraptor type creature they saw out there, and they saw a strange humanoid.
Yes.
And things that seem to be creatures that seem to be from a different time, like the big 800-pound wolf dog thing that Terry shot at. That was very early on as they were moving on, and a big patch of hair came off the wolf or whatever it was, and it didn't phase it, and it just So where are these? If these are creatures who may have existed in a different time, is that what is being accessed, or is what's being accessed another reality where those animals do exist? Now, let me tell you something real quick, and something you're aware of, but with all of the openings in the sky that they saw, 100 yards, 400 yards from the house, and about 100 feet in diameter, and there were 4 of them, and on the other side they could see a different sky. Now, whether you're talking about, and again I'm speculating entirely here, but whether you're talking about a cloaked ship or something that has its own environment inside, like a mothership, maybe that's it, or maybe it is windows to another time. But Terry, through the scope, saw these cylindrical openings close in it with some sort of mechanical. It was like the iris of a camera opening. If you open your aperture and you watch it, that's kind of what it was like. So, and then once the window closed, it was just blue skies. So
and I've got to cut you off right there because we're getting ready to go to break. And you're exactly, what is that? We're going to talk more about that and all of the frightening experiences that they had out there, and you and the Shenandoah Experiment, because this is very cool. I am Erica Lukes here with Zack Van Eyck, and we are talking Skinwalker Ranch. Stick around. Thanks for getting into the chat room, asking your questions. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
Broadcasting in digital HD radio.
What if maintaining a healthy weight was as simple as drinking a cup of coffee. With Valentis coffee, it's that easy. Harvested from the world's most pristine coffee farms and packed with the purest ingredients on earth, Valentis takes losing weight to a completely new level. At Valentis, we believe everyone deserves a chance to be healthy and fit. It's pure, natural, healthy, and delicious. Click the Valentis Healthiest Coffee banner on the KCOR Digital Radio Network website and take the Weight Loss Guarantee Challenge. Valentis Coffee, simply the world's healthiest coffee.
Paranormal, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal.
The U.S. military holds the ability to time travel.
Jeremy Scott asks the questions that we're all dying to know.
Wow, that's a remarkable question.
Watch your step. Hide under your blankets.
The show that is going to make you think.
Prepare yourself for what you're about to hear.
This transmission is coming to you.
You're riding into the paranormal.
Live Saturday night, 6 to 9 on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
America's favorite
radio station
just keeps getting better.
Hello, people. Aaron Hunter here, host of the show Real Paranormal Activity, where we tell the true stories of the paranormal from people like you. We also interview authors, mediums, psychics, and investigators as we dive headfirst into the murky waters of the paranormal. We discuss subject matters such as orbs, shadow people, paganism, the occult, and the demonic. Join me on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, here at KCOR Digital Radio Network.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. You are listening to KCOR, the best place on the planet to hear this show. Let me tell you, I'm so happy to be here and be a part of the KCOR family and have a producer like Tina Marie. I love this show, and I want to just tell you that each week I spend probably as many hours as a full-time job would require to research this subject, to find connections and to dig down, kind of peel away the layers so I can bring you the best researchers in the field and give you information so you can learn and grow. And for the past 2 years, I have done my show without charging for archives because I believe that that's important. So I just want to throw this out there. If you want to support UFO Classified, go to ufoclassified.com and make a donation. It is tax deductible. You can do that to help keep the research going and to help keep this show on the air. I appreciate you guys. You guys rock. I want to thank all my friends in the chat room tonight. Jeff, Northern UFOs, all my people are there. Dave, thanks for listening. All of you from all over the world. This is great. Tonight, I am here with the man that put Skinwalker Ranch on the map. He is an investigative journalist, a television and film writer, director, producer with more than 50 professional credits in his Hollywood career. He is working on a project right now called the Shenandoah Experiment. It's a sci-fi suspense drama about a disillusioned widow who is plunged into a world of paranormal anomalies when he inherits an isolated cabin from his time-traveling uncle. And although this is fiction, there are elements that are kind of bordering on some things, some experiences that Zack and his family and everyone has had. And I think, Zack, this is really, really cool. And I'm going to be posting the links for the show for everyone. And I'm just excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. Yeah, I'm really excited too. And hey, while we're asking for money, let me go ahead and give out our Indiegogo address. And this is for the Shenandoah experiment. And just so people understand, basically what we're doing, 29 Degrees Leo Productions is the name of my production company. We're shooting the Shenandoah experiment this summer. It's an ultra low budget, $250,000 and under time travel film that does include the blue orbs from the Sherman Ranch. And our hope is then to have success with this, which we think we will because we've done some things to ensure that. And then we can have a little bit bigger budget for our next film and do the Sherman Ranch story, which Ted Bonnet and I have written. Hopefully Ted will be calling in shortly. And it's called The Devil's Ranch, and it really does tell you exactly what happened to the Shermans for those 2 years. And, of course, that's my level of expertise because that is where I came in from the beginning, and I've sort of kept track of everything else. But basically, the Shenandoah experiment is what will put us in a position to get the Sherman Ranch information out there. And as you know, Erica, it's a great story. There's so much to it. And so first we need support for this first film. You can go to Indiegogo and you can look up the Shenandoah experiment. It's a film. Or you can go directly to igg.me/AT/29LEO. And I'll give you that one more time. It's igg.me/AT/29LEO. 29 Degrees Leo. I'm an astrologer, as you know, and I was born at 29 Degrees Leo along with my stepsister, Angela, who started the company with me. So that's why we are 29 Degrees Leo Productions, and we would appreciate your support. And I want to segue from there into just a brief comment from the Bigelow article I did in 98, because really what we're trying to do is the same thing that he said at that time he was trying to do, and that is make people more aware of what's going on, because the blue orbs are something that have not really been out there in fiction and really weren't out there in journalism until this story, although certainly we've heard about more cases. But this is something, I just want to read 3 paragraphs from my story. This, again, was Bob Bigelow talking in August of 98 when NIDS was out there and not telling anybody really what was going on. Okay? So just as Bigelow said, one reason he spends more than $1 million a year on NIDS research is to do what he feels the government and other institutions should be doing, preparing America and the rest of the world for eventual ET contact. That revelation, if confirmed suddenly and dramatically, Bigelow believes, could have a devastating psychosocial impact on global civilization. And he said, quote, "There are aspects of this phenomena that are going to be disturbing to the average person. It's more complex, more diverse, than I think is commonly recognized." He says, "We've been exposed to some things that are significantly different than the traditional body of information that you read about or that you watch on TV movies. And that increases the dynamics, the scope of what has to be digested." And then he said, it was the Wall Street Journal article, I believe, a few years ago where he said something about people have died, right? And people thought he was talking about the ranch, and he may or may not be, but I think he was talking about ufology in general. But anyway, maybe these 98 comments put those comments in more perspective. But it sounds like he obviously knew a lot at the time. But that's his motivation, and that's also our motivation too, is to make people aware of what's going on. And of course, in the Shenandoah experiment, we're taking it one step further and exploring time travel as well as other dimensions, and bringing in some metaphysical concepts as well to kind of tie it all together. And you can really only do that in fiction. Now, The Devil's Ranch will be a much more serious piece, still probably considered sci-fi, but definitely based on a true story. And in that piece, we really want to be as accurate and true to life as we can. In the first one, we're going to have a lot of fun speculating, and we will have the blue orbs, and that's going to be fun. And that's the one expense is the special effects for sure. But we also have a good budget. We have enough for a couple of name actors, and we're shooting it all on my family's property down by the river in Shenandoah County, Virginia, and we're really doing it there.
That'll be beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great location. And here's the thing, Erica. I've worked as a journalist in New Mexico, in Oregon, in Utah, and have always found plenty of stuff going on, plenty of sightings, plenty of reports, plenty of cattle mutilation. It's going on everywhere, and I'm sure if I digged into it in Virginia a little bit, I'd find out about it there too. But the idea here is that in fiction, we're saying that, okay, if the Sherman Ranch has some sort of like a vortex or special geographic or something about that area that makes it possible for other beings to come through, then there must be more. And let's say there was this scientist at Los Alamos who was the first to time travel, and this is our lead character. But then he runs afoul of the government because the government wants to go back and change history, of course, right? So,
right.
So what he does is he finds a vortex that is fairly isolated, and only he's going to know about them, and they're invisible anyway. And so he finds one in this rural Shenandoah area where he can buy property easily. And so he goes there and he creates a labyrinth, and that is how he time travels, is through basically the discipline of the mind. And, so much of ufology comes back to sort of, mind control. I mean, not what I'm talking about is like if you are flying a craft, as they back engineered, a lot of the aliens, if you will, allegedly, of course, are putting their hands on the platform. However it works, there's an interaction between the mind and the craft. So we started taking that a little bit further, and we said, well, look, if you're in a vortex area and you can travel, maybe it is about disciplining the mind. Maybe there's something about a higher level of intelligence or just disciplining your own mind, your human mind, to be able to step out of time. And so that's what the Shenandoah experiment is all about. We're just kind of having fun with all of the concepts that determine that.
Oh, and that's a wonderful thing to do, and I think it's pushing boundaries, and that's important. And the Sherman Ranch is so fascinating to me. I want to go back to some things you said in the last segment, and in one of those I want to just clarify for our listeners, Mildred Beasley was the former Utah State Director for MUFON. And I actually have some of her files here in my collection, and I wish that I could have met her and just get to know some of the people that really did all of the good reporting and investigative work with regard to Utah, because Utah is such a complex place, and people are not reporting, they're not getting involved. And praise the Lord for somebody like Junior Hicks, who has done a brilliant job for decades to preserve history. And I honestly think that if it wasn't for Junior Hicks, we would not have a clue about what took place on the Sherman Ranch.
Oh, absolutely. And Frank Salisbury, too, because Frank's the one who put me in touch with Junior. So, yeah, it was a really combined effort. And if that book had never been written, if Frank Salisbury and Junior hadn't done what they did, that really paved the way for me. So, absolutely. And Mildred was great as well. Yeah, tons of great people in Utah, very aware of what's going on in the Uinta Basin, has just had a complete history of it for, centuries. I mean, no one knows when it began. It seems like it was always, at least in the Indian culture, there was always this idea. Well, of course, they feel like there's a curse on the tribe because I guess in the 1800s, or I guess it was earlier than that, there was something I read about, wasn't it the Ute? Apparently their tribe was enslaving members of another tribe, and so they thought a curse was put on them, and that's the Skinwalker deal. And the Skinwalker is a good way to kind of explain everything that's going on, but of course it's much more complex than that.
Oh, it is absolutely much more complex. And I think that it's interesting to really begin to dig into this and to research it. And I think that there's some kind of myths that have been spun about this area. And while it is frightening and complex, and you will see everything, that you could ever think of in one place, I don't necessarily know if it is truly as malevolent as people think it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say the most extreme evidence of malevolence would be the blue orbs that zapped the dogs. And the reason that I say that is because, this is something that Terry observed. And they were, by that point, they were used to the blue orbs. They'd had an incident where one of them had come close. And these are about softball size, flying through the air with some sort of electrical charge. And they also sort of cause you to be very afraid. That artificial fear is what Terry said. So the first time that they really had contact, one of them was buzzing around one of the horses. Terry and Gwen were both there. It started to come at Gwen. She had a flashlight. She shined the light on it, and that caused it to move. It definitely, reacted to that, and they eventually, it left the area. But not long after that, and they used to see these blue orbs, before the cattle mutilations would occur, and often, before and after, and often during the new moon. So Terry saw one of these orbs. Typically what they would do is just kind of go down along the property line, like down by the creek, or one of the pasture, like the tree lines that separate the pasture. And it would just go along, and it would bounce along in the air, probably, 5 to 10 feet off the ground. And again, every time they saw it, even from far away, there was just this feeling of fear. And Terry's not a guy who's afraid of much. But he said, yeah, whenever they came around, they just gave you this artificial sense of fear. Now, on this particular occasion, the dogs, he had 3 healers out there, and they, were very aggressive when the balls would come around, barking and yipping, and he had them on a leash at this point. And Terry, I think he said in the book when he elaborated more about it, that he's not really sure why he let him off the leash, but he did. And the dogs went running, 100 yards away and started chasing the ball. Well, okay, so this blue ball is in the air, and it's kind of teasing the dogs and making them really angry by dipping down at a level where they can reach it. Then they snap their jaws, and then it pulls right back up. So Terry's watching this whole, carnival atmosphere. The dogs are just getting more frustrated. The blue ball is in control, and the blue ball is flying towards this grove of trees. And of course, this is often repeated. It seems like, the cattle mutilators like to work inside trees. And I have an example from New Mexico I can give you, but they noticed that on the ranch too, where it just seemed like, in this case in particular, that the blue orb was leading the dogs purposely into an area where no one could see. And after it did that, that's when Terry, they heard the yelps, and then they heard nothing else. And they didn't go out then because it was raining and it was at night and it was a new moon. You couldn't see anything, and there's a blue ball that it wants you to be afraid of it, so they're not going to go look. They go the next day, and they see the three circles of burned ash on the ground. And in David Perkins' research, talking to Terry before the gag order was placed, Terry elaborated a little bit and told David that there was some kind of like a apple butter type substance there, like greasy brown, something which was very similar to what is found on cattle mutilation. So interesting that if the ball was responsible, the blue orb, for terminating the dogs, which is what Terry saw happen, essentially, even though he didn't see it happen in the trees, but it's very logical that happened, then maybe somehow that energy, that electric energy, whatever's in the orb, is similar to what is being used for the cattle mutilations, and that's speculation that maybe no one else will make, but I feel comfortable with that. Right. But that's okay. So you've got a blue ball that is apparently electrically charged, and when they saw it up close before, when it approached Gwen, Terry was saying that you could see a light blue substance within it, like water or some kind of liquid that was to the boiling point or was about to boil. So
yes,
right.
That's very common when you hear about up close sightings of orbs, that kind of churning lava-like substance.
Exactly. And so, and if these orbs are capable of essentially electrocuting, zapping, extinguishing something immediately, which seems to be what they're capable of, then that's pretty potent, and that's a pretty good antagonist in your sci-fi movie. So that's why it's there.
And I like it. But I mean, when you're telling me this, I'm thinking about what we do to the other living creatures on the planet. We're hunting, and we're killing magnificent creatures and pulling them out into locations. And maybe perhaps this is some intelligence this is their home, and we really don't have a clue. But how could we? I don't know. I just sometimes think that we can't put things in a box, and we can't say that this is malevolent or demonic, or we need to engage this perhaps like Bigelow did. Perhaps there is some way of engaging this with a mutual respect or a sense of awe, and maybe things would be different. And I have to ask you, with regard to the way that Bigelow went in there with his research team, and they're the world's best, but do you think perhaps it was too analytical? Do you think it was too black and white? And do you think that they really got the results that they were after?
No, I don't think they got the results they were after at all. And I think really their conclusion was just that whatever the phenomena is, it is something that knows you're there and knows you're watching, and it isn't going to perform. It isn't going to do what it wants to do if you're watching, which makes sense. But yes, whatever these beings are, they could in fact inhabit the earth just like us. I mean, there's the local Indians have said for some time that they thought something was going on under the ground. I know that there was an ice circle that they saw on the ranch, and they brought a psychic. That was in the book. They brought a psychic out, and of course in the book they say, well, we're just sharing this with you because the psychic, we don't really think it's, but they put it in the book. And the psychic said basically, yeah, you got activity underground. There's somebody coming through here, and you got something's underground that's living there. So, are they visiting from somewhere else? Or yeah, maybe they've been there longer than us. I mean, who knows? But yeah, are we sharing the earth, or is there something that we're doing that is causing something on, a different dimension or a different level? I mean, we just don't know. And quantum physics is, of course, starting to break some barriers. But here's the thing, Erica, I would say that that happened allegedly on the ranch. And of course, John Alexander talks about this in the video that's online. But basically, there was and I do know who it is, but I won't say. But there was a NIDS investigator who was out there, and you're probably aware of this, who had apparently a telepathic moment with something in the sky. There were two NIDS investigators out there, and apparently this particular one was one who was contacted, and they were both in the shack. You know, they were sitting there playing cards because they've been there for months and nothing's happened. And all of a sudden, there's a light outside, and the one guy because what I read was from the observer, from the two NIDS investigators. This was the one who observed what happened to the other guy. And the other guy, suddenly when the light showed up outside, he sort of appeared like in a trance state, and he said, "We need to go outside," which would not be my reaction. But anyway, he went out, and the other guy watched and couldn't really see much. He saw sort of a brown spot in the sky, but that was about it. But he saw this other guy just staring up and looking at it for like 2 minutes, and he seemed kind of really dazed and in a trance and whatever. And then all of a sudden, this little spot that the other guy was seeing disappeared. And he heard all about it from the other guy. And the other guy said, "Yeah, you know, they talked to me. They telepathically, they spoke to me. They said that, you know, they know what we're doing." And this is what I thought was interesting, is that they said something about they know what they're doing, only our roles are reversed. He said that they have the advantage, that humans can't stop them from doing whatever they want to do. And then they told him something like, "We're going back to work now." And then the other guy says it was really chilling. I wish I could remember everything he said. And I do have an idea who this person is, and I'd love to talk to them, and we'll try to do that at some point. But there you can see that there was at least an effort to communicate and to say, you know, "Hey, dude, this is what's going on." You know. Now, my question is, if they're saying we're doing the same thing, only our roles are reversed, what does that mean? Now, I was thinking about this last night because I was trying to think what this means. So if whatever was in the sky was talking to them, whatever's in the sky may assume that they're talking to the person who is hybriding the cattle, like they're talking to Terry, or they're aware that they're hybrid cattle because that's what that's what is being mutilated, right? So are they saying that, you know, we have the same roles or just reversed, meaning that the humans are hybriding cattle while these other people are hybriding humans or something else? Is that what they mean? So, you know, I just thought that was really curious, and I'd love to know more about that. I can't find anything about that now. So I think it was something that was kind of, you know, taken back, but very interesting. So, you know, I mean, I think it seems like, and you know, like when Terry and his son were out there on the ranch at one point, they heard these voices in the sky, you know, like 25 feet above them, as if there was a cloaked ship or something, and they spoke Klingon or something like Russian. And Terry said, "Hey, we can hear you," and then they all laughed. So, you know, it's like there's definitely this awareness. Terry was always aware that whatever and whoever it is aware of what they're doing, and he would get, like, he'd see a craft 400 yards away, he'd start walking towards it. When he got just like 300 yards away, it would either move, or he just felt for sure that they knew it was him and they were watching him, and they're very aware. So I think there's been some attempts to communicate, obviously, if that really happened, and that makes sense to me. That, you know, but also, what are they really up to? And of course, Linda Moulton Howe talks about how really there's, with the cattle mutes anyway, probably some of it is for protein, you know, maybe being somehow ingested or used as food, but that she feels like basically, you know, everybody she's talked to in the government, and she has so many great sources, that there are more than one species who are trying to replicate their own, you know, trying to survive basically by using the genetic material that's here, either in humans or cattle or whatever. So, you know, and that theory is not new, that's been out forever, but this seems to kind of dovetail with that a little bit, although we don't know really what these people are doing. We do know that the ranch, you know, there were 10 cows total. I think 4 disappeared. I know 3 were mutilated for sure when I talked to Terry, and 4 had disappeared. I'm sorry, 3 disappeared. One of those 4 came back, was found at a neighboring ranch 20 miles away, like the next day. So there's no way the cow walks there, right? So 4 cows were picked up, and for some reason they decided to, oh, hey, we don't need this one. There's a pasture. Let's drop it in there. You know, so.
And isn't that interesting? And you said something that struck me in the first segment. You said that Linda Moulton Howe was working for NIDS.
Well, she not for NIDS, but for Bob Bigelow. She had a grant from Bigelow back in the 90s. It was, I guess it would have been, probably 91, 92, I think. And I think that was short-lived. But I mean, they were basically after the same thing, and so he was supporting her in her research. Yeah, but I don't think she ever worked for NIDS. But they had an association and probably still do. I had an association with him. I interviewed him,
right.
And actually he offered me a job with NIDS, but my ex-wife didn't want me to take it because it wasn't enough money. and Bigelow, and that's Bigelow. He doesn't really, one reason you're rich is because you don't pay a lot of people a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's definitely the word on the street. So.
Yeah, so, but and that would have been fun. I think I would have obviously been privy to more information, but it's probably best that didn't happen, because then I think there would be a real conflict, which I think everyone who's ever worked for him, I think probably has a conflict about, how much we can say and how much we don't want to say. And, and Bob Bigelow, certainly, I think, and I don't mean this as a negative thing, but he's a controlling guy.
Right.
and most people who are successful tend to be. I'm a little controlling with my producing work, and I understand that. It's got to be right, it's got to be perfect, and he's definitely driven. And I just see him as, he just seems so determined to get out there and build these space stations and get us out into space. And whatever reason, I think it's definitely something that's soul driven, and it's very interesting because Bigelow, he could be a very key factor, key component in helping us. I don't know, helping us as humans become more aware of what's going on. Like for example. Is part of his hope that he gets people out there, and then some visitors stop by? I don't know, and I always go back, like, is he really after money? Because I understand that he was kind of a tightwad, if you will, with his real estate stuff, and he was trying to make as much money as he could. And some people had issues with the way he conducted his business, but his goal was always to make money so that he could go into space. So what he really wants to do, I don't even know if he knows, but I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens with his company over the next 20, 30 years.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to talk a bit more about Bigelow when we come back. I am Erica Lukes here with the one and only Zack Van Eyck, who is an award-winning journalist, producer, television writer. He's working on the Shenandoah experiment, which is very cool. We're going to talk more about that when we get back. Get into chat, go to UFOclassified.com and show your support. We love you guys. Thanks for being here and asking all your great questions. We will see you on the other side of the break.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone, and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes, always happy to be here on the best digital broadcasting network on the planet. I want to give a shout out to my producer, Tina Marie, who does an excellent job making this show sound so incredible. I will be posting the archive, so make sure you share it, because I feel, as many of you do, that the information on UFO Classified is important and it needs to reach everyone. There is something taking place on our planet, and we need to really dedicate a lot of funding to research what's taking place. There are areas all over the world where there have been repeated sightings, not only of UFOs, but of strange creatures, paranormal happenings, and these have been taken place for centuries. And you could look at the work of Zack Van Eyck to really understand this. But one of these places, a very special place, a very frightening and complex and beautiful place, is called Skinwalker Ranch. My guest this evening, actually we've got another guest joining us, which this is going to be really cool, but Zack Van Eyck was the Deseret News journalist who really broke the story on Skinwalker Ranch, and through all of this, he exposed a place that was terrifying for the Shermans, who were a family, cattle ranchers. They were just trying to earn a living and get a sense of community, but through terrorizing events, their dogs being chased by a blue ball and vaporizing into the grease puddles, all of these things happened, and then multimillionaire Robert Bigelow from Bigelow Aerospace bought the property and conducted scientific research there. We've not really yet seen that, so I'm kind of wondering what happened with that. But Zack, welcome back to the show. You're doing some really cool things, the Shenandoah experiment. We're going to talk about that, but I also want you to take a moment to introduce your colleague who is on the line, because you two have worked together for a long, long time.
Yeah, I will, and I don't know how long we're going to have Ted, so I'll try to be quick. But I wanted to mention real quick that Zack Van Eyck allegedly was brought out to the ranch by Robert Bigelow on that first visit, apparently. And if that's true, that makes sense that Bigelow would call him in and say, hey, what do you think? And apparently, Zack said some good things because Bigelow ended up buying the ranch. So I wanted to add that. Ted Bonnet is my co-writer, co-producer on The Devil's Ranch, which is the script we have written about the Sherman Ranch, the Skinwalker Ranch, and it's about the first 2 years in the Sherman's experiences there. And after I wrote the article, we, of course, followed up with the Deseret News, but, you know, I'm a full-time reporter working overtime, covering politics, everything else. Ted was a broadcast journalist for a long time in New York. He started a company called Seventh Planet Radio Pictures that did radio advertising for the movies, and since then he has gone on to UFO Grid, which I've written for. UFO Grid is a fantastic website that you should check out now if you can. Has so much information, and everything that I've ever covered as a reporter is pretty much on that site, including the New Mexico cattle mutilations. I did a summary. It's about a 6-page summary, which I just looked at the other day. It's pretty good, and that's something that really isn't out there. As we said earlier, the stuff in New Mexico was pretty exciting too, but that really hasn't gotten the coverage. But it's on UFO Grid, and so without further ado, let's get Ted Bonnet on, and he can tell you, Erica, I think just ask him about what's most prominent in his memory of what happened at Sherman Ranch, and we'll see what he thinks was most interesting.
Oh, and Ted, I just want to say how cool. Thank you for calling. And how have I not heard or connected with you before?
I guess I've been hiding.
We've got to stop doing that, because clearly we need to connect.
Thanks for
Ted lives up there. Ted, you have property up in Utah, so he's still there sometimes.
Oh,
yeah, well, that's how I stumbled onto the story. Actually, I had just bought some property in the Park City area, but it was some raw land, about 8,000 feet, and I was camping up there. And at the time, I was doing a lot of paranormal research, not in Utah, but in Fife, Alabama, Sand Mountain, where there was a lot of activity. That's where I first became acquainted with the mutilation phenomena, and had done a lot of coverage in the Hudson Valley during the Hudson Valley sightings period, and other places. But Utah really wasn't on the map at the time. This was mid-'90s. And I had met an interesting character, to say the least, in Alabama, who had this, evidently had one foot on the other side. He was able to let people know when something was going to happen, which sometimes is hard to believe, but enough people had come to challenge him, including journalists, actually requesting an experience. And then they would have one, and they'd be sorry they asked. But he has always had a kind of a mischievous sense of humor about things. And, you know, you never knew to believe him or not, or, you know, and he's a friend, so he was nothing. There was no malfeasance involved, but he was kind of teasing me once he realized the city slicker from New York had just bought some land up in the middle of nowhere on a mountain at 8,000 feet and was camping for the first time. And he said, "Well, maybe we could have some visitors for you." And I said, No. I'm already overwhelmed here in the wilderness. I don't need any company, please. And someone we were working with, Ted Oliphant, who's done a lot of research, who brought me to meet this man originally. He was a police officer. Ted was working as a police officer, so he had official investigative powers in Alabama to investigate the mutilations. And I caught the story when I was working at NBC Network Radio in Washington, D.C., and it came over the wire. And happenstance brought me down to Sand Mountain about 3 months after I interviewed them. And Ted showed me the area where all the activity and mutilations were occurring. And then he brought me to some interesting characters to meet, including the local newspaper publisher, who then brought me to this very interesting gentleman who I'm speaking of. So we became fast friends. And so we were, Ted and this fellow, Phil, were teasing me and said, "Well, maybe we can get something going up there." And I said, "No, really, I don't. I'm not a deer in the headlights. I don't need to have any action." And anyway, he took to it and said, actually Utah is an interesting place, and there's going to be some interesting sightings. And to prove it to me, he said, "I'm going to make a list for you guys of things that are going to happen." I'm thinking, oh boy. And why don't you guys find a trained observer who's in the area locally to send that list to? Now I'm thinking, who's going to believe us? Who's going to think we're not nuts? And Ted had not my Ted, I mean, we're both Teds, but this Ted Oliphant had this uncanny ability to find great sources. And he knew about Zack. He knew about Zack's journalism on the subject in New Mexico prior to his moving to Utah. And Zack, so we found Zack, and Ted approached Zack initially and faxed him this list of high strangeness activity that we thought might be occurring in the area in the near future. And I was happy to say Zack didn't hang up the phone, didn't think we were insane, which really I couldn't understand why he did think that, because it was pretty crazy. But he just said, okay, that's Zack's nature, okay. And about, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Zack, but I think about 2 weeks into it, I got a call from Zack and said, "Well, I checked off just about everything on the list," which kind of blew my mind. And just because he was, eyes on the ground and had, as a reporter, saw reports. In fact, I got a call from a stranger in Utah who had read Zack, who was somehow, I guess, contacted Zack because he knew of his reputation, and he was freaked out because he had seen a large triangular-shaped UFO ship on the benches over Salt Lake City, and all his friends were laughing at him, and he thought he was questioning his sanity. And Zack and I had conversations because I had tracked this object for many years, not realizing I was tracking the same object over New York all the way down to Florida. So Zack suggested this fellow call me. So I get this cold call from this very upset person who lived in the Salt Lake area, asking if he was insane. I asked him to explain what he had seen. And I said, "Listen, I don't know what you saw, if you saw anything, but what you're describing is something I've had various law enforcement people tell me in interviews from New York down to Florida, seeing the same object." And he was just, he didn't so much care about it. He was just relieved to know that he had not hallucinated, that he hadn't seen something in his imagination and then questioned his sanity. So at that point, my friend, we said, "Well, I don't know how you did it, but this list, we found somebody, Zack, and he has checked off this list of odd events, and so obviously something's going on." And that's when this gentleman said that, there was something, strange going on in the Utah area. And it wasn't specific, but about that time, I hope my timeline's right, because we're going back over 20 years here. But I believe at that point, Zack broke the story just by good old-fashioned reporting. He went out looking, digging on the story a little bit, talked to, he probably got into this already, Junior Hicks, and just offhandedly asked Junior if anything was happening currently, and he happened to mention this family, and Zack the good reporter is, just drove over to the Shermans and knocked on the door and got the story. And so, in a way, I was kind of brought up to speed in the oddest of ways and was aware of the occurrences as they were happening. I wasn't curious enough to go, or brave enough to go out to the ranch while it was happening. But we were aware at the time that Bigelow was called by one of the researchers who were in touch with the Shermans. Zack was, I think, about one of four reporters and researchers that were talking to the family during their experience. I was not one of them. And so one of them, I believe it was David Perkins, said, look, maybe we can get you out of this, and called NIDS, called the National Institute for Discovery, and Bigelow came right up. And correct me if I'm inaccurate on this, Zach, but that's how I recall the story. And Bigelow came up in his Learjet into the middle of nowhere there and checked it out and eventually bought the place rather quickly, and then tried to fence off the phenomena. And there was a problem with that, as I was told by my source, which is the phenomena doesn't like to be caged in and doesn't like to be privatized. And I understand why the Bigelow organization privatized the information, because they wanted to keep it pure. They didn't want ridicule. And eventually, I think the main reason Bigelow never went public with what he discovered there was because he had gone into the low Earth orbit hospitality business. And as you know, he made his fortune on in the hotel industry. And he's building these inflatable low Earth orbit hotels that he's trying to get off the ground with government contracts. So it wouldn't be in his best interest to be promoting secretive information that's sensitive to the government. So I think if any, I don't know, there may have been far more motives, but I'm sure that is certainly one. And that's why, it never really took off. And there was some resentment about that, no one can privatize this stuff. No one can contain it. The phenomena, being an independent non-human intelligence, if you will not be contained. And sure enough, as soon as Bigelow bought the place and kind of fenced it off, unlike the Shermans, who were open about what was happening, my friends said, well, the phenomena's not going to put up with it. It's just going to move 40 miles down the road. And sure enough, activity tapered off. Now, again, it's really difficult to understand if anything really happened at the ranch after the Shermans left, because Bigelow, doesn't tell the story. Now, Tom Kelleher, who worked for him, was basically his operational guy, and oh God, my memory.
George Knapp. Yes.
Thank you, George Knapp, the Las Vegas journalist, were there, and they wrote the book, Skinwalker Ranch, which personally I thought was I thought the last chapter resonated and was good. I thought a lot of it was, George is a showman as much as he's a journalist, and I don't mean that in a critical manner. He knows how to present information in really compelling ways. But, the book kind of left me cold because I don't really feel I got solid information. And it's still rumor and innuendo about what's going on, or if anything did go on. We've heard everything from nothing to a security guard being killed. So, but who knows? And,
exactly. And it's interesting, and I just have to interject because I was fortunate to have a couple conversations with Dr. Frank Salisbury, and I mean, that was one of his comments. One of his main beefs was the fact that Hunt for the Skinwalker, they didn't accurately portray things that were taking place. But I mean, so you've got different perspectives from different researchers, but I have to say Hunt for the Skinwalker is one of my favorite books.
Well, did Frank tell you that he felt like things were being withheld? Is that, if I can interject, is that...
It's not so much that he said things were being withheld, but he thought that there was a bit of a dramatic flair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did think
with
that.
regard
I got to know,
the book.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I got to know Frank. I happened to call him because I wanted to read Junior Hicks and get the story. And I called Frank out of the blue, and it was a good time, evidently, because he said, boy, it's interesting you called because I'm going to do a second edition of my book. And so he said, would you help me? So what little help I did. I mean, I got to know him. I spent some time with him, God rest his soul, and had a very interesting interview with him which I videotaped a couple of hours, asking him how does he intersect his, fundamentalist Mormon beliefs, his JPL scientific career, and dabbling in UFOs all at the same time. I mean, how do you reconcile three distinctly different, contrasting perspectives on reality? And Frank had a really philosophical view of it. He felt it was all interrelated, and it supported his faith, and it was interesting. But Frank was friends with Junior Hicks. He was also friends with Jacques Van Eyck. He also had an interesting coincidental relationship. He met some, because he was, spent his career and most of his adult life in Salt Lake City. And he, through a friend or family connection, met a relative of the owners of the ranch before the Shermans. It was, I believe it was two women, right, Zach?
Yes. They were the ones who moved in after the Myers, or after the Mrs. Meyer died, I believe, in 1980, and then two women lived there for a brief time. And I think you were the one who got that information here.
Yes, and what really impressed Frank was that this gentleman, was a personal connection. There was no motive to be untrue in any way to him about his perspective on it. But this gentleman was insistent that I think it was his aunt that owned it. One of the women were his aunt. He said they had never had any paranormal experience whatsoever. They didn't, and so Frank became skeptical of the entire thing at that point, because he just thought, well, how could that be? How could that be that there was nothing, there was no activity, and this gentleman had been on the ranch visiting his aunts, and there was never any talk. And you'd imagine one experience on the magnitude of what the Shermans described would have impressed anyone's memory. And this fellow was absolutely adamant that nothing ever happened on the ranch. So this really kind of put Frank in a tailspin about the validity of the whole ranch story. So that's where I think Frank had a little jaundiced view about the book Skinwalker Ranch, because he thought it was maybe the whole thing was hyped up, and the Shermans were just trying to get a sale out of the ranch. I don't agree with that perspective, but that's kind of what accounts for Frank's skepticism. So that it was an interesting difference of view, let's put it that way. And all this is about shared perspectives and differences of views, because we all know with phenomena, 10 people can be looking at the same thing and they'll all come back with a different impression of what it was. So, another example of high strangeness.
Absolutely. And I think it is interesting because, of course, you've got Dr. Frank Salisbury, who's a scientist, and, everything is very cut and dried. And so instead of him asking, why are some people seeing different types of phenomena and others aren't, I mean, instead of asking bigger questions, it's kind of, well, this must be BS because the Sherman saw it, but the older owners didn't. I mean, that's in my mind, and I think the world of him and his work, and God bless him. But I mean, that is kind of the scientific perspective. It's very narrow-minded in a way.
Well, yeah, and go ahead, Zach.
No, go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
That's the rub on this whole subject matter, and one of the most, frustrating things. I mean, the reason I started UFOgrid.com was because no one was, looking at the subject, I thought, in journalistic standards, because so often, and I'm not saying we're the only ones that do that, but I certainly apply it to our site because, so often when people are confronted with the unknown, it really goes right to the core of your fears and, your spirit. And in an effort to comfort oneself, people tend to draw conclusions so they can then, compartmentalize it in their mind. And it's not this open, sucking fear of like, what the hell was that? And is it more powerful than me? Am I threatened? Now, most of the time, people who have these experiences, nothing happens to them, but just the mere notion of being confronted with something big and unusual and possibly ugly connotes, fear. It's this it's the fear factor. I mean, for survival, it's understandable. And so many people then become evangelists for their own conclusions, and then you have so much dogma attached to the subject matter, and then you have this, specter of irrationality that then discounts and marginalizes the entire subject, and people get confused, frustrated, and just too uncomfortable, and then the subject is dismissed. And plus the government, if you will, the secret elements of the government that have investigated the subject from the days of the Washington flap in 1952, have always tamped down the notion of something beyond our control for probably as simple a reason as just, controlling fear and, subduing panic potential. And so, as we all know, that's been an orchestrated campaign all along to suppress the information, marginalize it, and to make people uncomfortable even suggesting it and not conducting serious study. And that's a whole nother topic. But so the ranch, but that's not to say Frank didn't believe or have enough information for him to accept that there was that the Uinta Valley area or Uinta Basin is certainly an area of high strangeness, because with Junior Hicks, they had a lot of data that Frank, as a scientist, confirmed in his mind existed. And I spoke to the Ute Indians who surround the ranch, and they were adamant they do not let the people on that ranch. They have no
see, this is great. And I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off right there because we're getting ready to go to break. But we're going to be back and we're going to talk about the Native American connection and what both of you found out when you were investigating this. And I just want to say this is an amazing episode of UFO Classified. I am Erica Lukes, and this is KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network. We're going to be back with Zach and Ted, more on Skinwalker Ranch on the other side of the break.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about, at least not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
Okay, so 5 tacos of cheese and a large soda. That's $10,012. Please drive around.
Wait, 10,000 what?
It's obvious you're buzzed and driving.
I've only had a few. I'm fine.
Yeah, the food's $12, but getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Please drive around. Actually, just park and come in.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. For Hyperspace. The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Want to take a ride?
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes, always happy to be here on the best digital broadcasting network on the planet. Again, a big thanks to my excellent producer, Tina Marie, and all of the people at KCOR, and all of you in the chat room and people listening worldwide. It is amazing to receive messages from you and to have you reach out and help create this worldwide community. This is important. We need to share information, and we definitely need to break down some perceptions about all of this that is interacting with us, this phenomenon. We need to get good research done, yada, yada. You know my spiel. You can listen to it on past episodes. But tonight I am here talking about Skinwalker Ranch and much more with two people that were on the front lines. And I am joined by Ted Bonet, his website is UFO Grid, so go check it out. He's a former investigative broadcast journalist. And I'm here with the one and only Zack Van Eyck, who is the man who put Skinwalker Ranch on the map. He was a reporter for the Deseret News, and now and much, much more. But now they are both working on the Shenandoah Experiment, which is a sci-fi suspense drama about a disillusioned widower who is plunged into the world of the paranormal. And clearly, after listening to both of you, I can see where you guys are coming up with this. And it's great.
Well, thanks, Erica. Yeah, I'm going to turn it back over to Ted real quick to talk, because he has to go, and I know he knows more about the Native American reaction there in Utah and elsewhere. But yes, what we're trying to do is put the blue orbs in the movie we're shooting this summer, and hopefully make a little money so that we have a bigger budget for the Devil's Ranch, which is the script that Ted's written with me about what happened to the Shermans. So yeah, this is two films, a little confusing, but we're on Indiegogo. If you look up the Shenandoah Experiment, you'll find us. And now you should talk to Ted before he has to leave.
Yes, Ted, I'm so excited. Okay, so let's talk about the Native American connection with regard to Skinwalker Ranch, and perhaps more broadly about this phenomenon in general and the connection.
Well, sure. Whatever I can offer in perspective, I've had a separate relationship, fortunately, with some Native American traditional medicine men, just by good fortune, and so I've learned a lot and have really worked to learn their perspective on reality. And I was before any of this happened in 1990. When I was working on an NPR program, I was invited to the Hopi Fourth Mesa in Hovilla, which is the traditional mesa of the Hopis. I mean, that's the sacred of sacred. And I had not been on any Indian reservation, and I was there to interview a gentleman who was between 95 and 105 years old. He was a Hopi traditional medicine man, and he had escaped the forced relocation of the Hopi children. His parents hid him in a cave. and raised him traditionally. And at 95 to 105, we didn't know how old he was still fighting the non-traditionalists. But he had the power. He had power I'd never seen before. And I had interviewed secretaries of state and CEOs of IT&T about Allende's overthrow. I had never met a more powerful person than Titus who lived in a simple trailer, much like Thunderheart. It was almost identical looking. And I spent 2 days with him, and I was invited to come see him because he wanted to speak to the world about a prophecy before he passed. And so that was the reason I was there. And he was very old, and they were still, the non-traditionalists were still trying to kill him because he was getting in the way of them making, the non-traditionals making money. There was a Tony Hillerman book being made into a film with Robert Redford directing at the time. And there was big uproar on the Hopi Reservation, who, if you don't know, are very secretive traditionalists to try to preserve their knowledge. They do not like outsiders there. It was very special that I was even there. And Titus was the kind of person who would stop the non-traditionals from selling essentially their sacred ritual dances for essentially extra wages to do it in the movie, that kind of thing. So this is the backdrop. And Titus was, even as an old man on a tractor, they had knocked him off his tractor, and he was barely able to walk and speak at this point. And he was very frustrated by it. So he wanted to explain something to me about his relationship with reality. And I'm sorry to go off the trail here, but it makes sense in the long run. What I'm trying to say is that traditionalists, Native American traditionalists, have an entirely different interface, if you will, with everyday reality. They are essentially poor by our standards and do not have any technology really around them. So their brains are still focused on getting things done medically through using, if you will, terrestrial energies and powers to heal. Very serious stuff, which sounds crazy on the surface of it, but really when you see it, isn't. And Titus had shown me he was the best agrarian on the reservation. He had 5 acres of stout corn growing in unirrigated sand. And I asked him how he watered his plants. And he said, I sing to them. And I said, well, that's a lot of singing. And the next night, after he was comfortable, he tried to speak to me on the microphone and couldn't because of all his medical issues. He got frustrated and picked up a drum, went into a trance, and started drumming. I mean, so slightly at first, you could barely hear the drumstick hitting the skin of the drum. But over time, it started to circle and then hitting the skin, hitting the skin, hitting the skin. And then this old man who would take 20 minutes to walk 10 feet started pounding on that drum. It was coming through him. And he pounded and he pounded and he pounded and he sang. And then it rained like hell. It was just amazing.
Oh, my gosh.
And he did it twice. And then he kind of looked at me, and smiled. And then I spoke to his family, and they had regular encounters with what we would call phenomena, UFOs, creatures, sightings, but they weren't freaked out about it. They were regarded as spirit guides. I later met and befriended a Lakota traditional medicine man who would call me when he said he saw a Bigfoot. Now, they had no problem with Bigfoot. In fact, the Bigfoot to them usually shows, it portends something for them to look at. They look at the Bigfoot as a spirit guide that is there to help them. So you have to understand, they have an entirely different relationship, and they kind of get a good laugh at things about the white guy. Like, you think a fat guy in a red suit comes down your chimney every December 25th and brings gifts? I mean, they think that's funny. And, when you look at it in the face of it, they do. They also think it's very funny that we are so freaked out and anxious about the notion that we may not be alone in the universe. So they have a very sophisticated understanding of what we call UFOs. And so I found this across the spectrum. So when I called the Utes about the ranch, I got the same feeling from him, even though I didn't speak to a traditionalist. He said, look, we just don't let people there because that's a bad place. I mean, you don't even, Native Americans don't even want to mention the name verbally, Skinwalker, because they feel it's inviting trouble. And so they don't let anybody on that ranch. And my friend who lives 800 miles away, or maybe 500 miles away in Pine Ridge, the Lakota, they knew all about the ranch, and they've known about that ranch for decades. So something's going on there, and they go, "Oh, you're going down there? You don't want to go down there." So there is a Native American connection to phenomena, and I'll leave it at this. The only thing I've ever seen was when I went over to England, to Wiltshire, to study the crop circles, and I went to, one night I went out with my colleague on a project to see if we could see anything. So we went to a hilltop. And I was the only one that stayed awake all night. And just about when dawn broke, I saw a luminescent object that looked like an aircraft maybe coming at me with its landing lights, but it was more of a gold, warm color. And I didn't think much of it, and I circled the sky around and said, look, if it's there when I circle around again, I'll keep looking at it. And it was. And now dawn's coming up, and I think to myself, look, if that's a plane coming at me, because it was definitely in the atmosphere, it wasn't in space, and it wasn't too far away. Could have been 10 miles or closer. And when I thought to myself, listen, the sun's starting to come up, or at least the light, so I'm going to see an outline of wings if it's coming at me, and that's why it's stable. And when I thought that, it just shot straight up in the air and just disappeared, just dematerialized, vanished. And it didn't even affect me. I just thought, oh, that's interesting. The next day, I spoke to a researcher there I was interviewing, and he happened to ask me, hey, have you seen anything? And then it jogged my memory, and I said, well, yes, actually, I did. He said, what'd you see? I said, I don't know, it was like a ball of light. And it was just sitting there. And he goes, well, do you remember where you were? And I do have a good sense of direction. We had a government topographical map, and I said, I was on this hill. He said, well, where was it? And I said, and I moved my finger towards the direction of where I thought it was. He said, I think it was probably about there. He said, well, what are you looking at? And I looked at the map, and it said Golden Ball Hill. And he said, you saw a golden ball. And I said, wow, that's interesting. He said, well, that's very lucky. The next night we went out as journalists, went to the famous Barge Inn, and followed the group of people to see if we could see anything. It was a big night for some reason. It was the 2nd and 10th anniversary of the sighting, so they thought it was a good night to go out and look for UFOs in that area of England. So we followed them. Where did they go in the 50 square mile area? They went on the very hill that I was on the night before. Very odd coincidence.
And I have to say that you're like telling me this, and I was there last summer. And so I love it because, yes, I've been to all of those places, and I actually stepped foot into my first crop circle. So you're bringing it home for me.
Oh, it was just great. And I'm sorry to go so long, but I'll wrap up on this. And what happened was, they sat around till midnight and nothing came. And they go, well, it didn't happen this year. And then I remembered the next day, I thought, it did happen on the anniversary. It just happened in the morning, not in the night. And I'm the only one, I guess, that saw it on the anniversary date. And so my point is that what I saw there did not look extraterrestrial, did not look alien, did not look like it was menacing. In fact, it was comforting. If anything, it was terrestrial. It was earthbound. It was energetic. It was something, a layer of reality we just aren't familiar with. We like to think we know everything, but we hardly do. So I think the Native Americans see a lot of this because they're in the dark. They're not surrounded by electronics. They have a rooted history, and they have a much more comfortable grounding with aspects of our reality, whether it be extraterrestrial or terrestrial phenomena. And so I have never seen any evidence of anything extraterrestrial, me personally. That's not to say that there isn't, but I haven't. What I have seen is something I can't explain, but doesn't necessarily make me think or jump to any conclusions of what it is. So I think the Native American connection is a more grounded and healthier connection about phenomena. And if you ever have the opportunity to get to know one, a Native American medicine man, particularly traditional, talk to them about it, because you'll find that they're much more measured about it. It's not a big deal. They respect it. They don't freak about it. And they kind of get a chuckle when they look at us, freaking out about, what could it be? It's like, the last thing I'll say is what Titus said to me, the Hopi. The first thing he said to me when he met me was, the first thing you have to know is that you'll never know. So some people see, others observe. Some people hear, other people listen. If you learn to observe and listen long enough and walk your road, you'll see something someday that you never noticed before just because you were looking for it. And then as you train your mind, you'll see more and more and more. And then he swirled his hand and said, suddenly you'll see eventually all around you. And you see that is life. Walk it, see it, don't try to pin it, and learn as much as you can on your walk through. And you know, hopefully it will benefit you. So I guess that's my spiritual take on it.
Oh God, you know, and I will say that I have the chills because that is exactly, you have nailed so many things. That is exactly how I feel, and I think the more you look into this, the more you are hit with the very profound spiritual implications of all of this. And I thank you. You said it perfectly, and I needed to hear that tonight.
My pleasure.
So,
thank you.
Oh
for
my
having
gosh,
me
and
on, Eric.
absolutely, and I need to talk to you, and then I need to get you back on the show, and UFO Grid is where you can find Ted's work and much more, and we'll keep everybody updated about this. But thank you for joining us, and go have fun with your family now.
Great. If anybody wants to reach me or if you want to contact me, the email contact on the UFOgrid.com website will come to me.
Awesome. Well, I'll be contacting you, so prepare yourself.
All right, thanks. Take care, Zach.
Have a good night.
All right, Ted, take care. Yeah, Ted is awesome, isn't he?
You know, I really am digging your friend.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. I will say I've met some pretty cool people who are very like-minded, very intelligent, approaching this the same way I have over the years, and a lot of them doing it independently. And Ted's one of those. And yeah, he's amazing. Perfect guy to combine with to write The Devil's Ranch for sure. And Eric, I know we don't have much time, but I wanted to add just a couple things with regard to the Utes locally and the Sherman Ranch. Basically, I would add this. I would say, first of all, that my impression is that, you know, when I went out there in '96, that it was pretty much common knowledge among the Indians. I mean, I don't think there were many local Utes who were not aware of the ranch and not aware of all the activity. And like Ted said, it was just kind of like, well, yeah, okay, we exist, they exist. We can't explain it. We don't know. There's a lot we don't know. What's the big deal? You know, that kind of thing. However, what Terry found out was that the Utes who work over at the water and sewer plant, which is right, or maybe just water, I'm not sure, but it's near the road to the ranch. And when the family moved on there, Terry was told later that all of the workers got together and participated in a pool to determine how long the family would last on the ranch. And apparently the longest guess was 18 months, and they beat that. I think it was 20 or 22 months that they were actually on the ranch. And then the other thing that's curious is that when Terry was buying the ranch, normally, you know, there's private land surrounded by Indian land there. And so normally what you have to do when you buy the property is you have to have a certificate through the Ute tribe that where they go on and they look for artifacts, and they can say, no, there's no Indian artifacts here, et cetera. It's just a formality, but it has to be done. And so when he went to the tribe, they said, oh, no, there's no reason to do that. There's no Indian artifacts over there. We don't go over there. So I thought that was really interesting.
You know, that is interesting. And I mean, there's so many things that you have said that are just pretty mind-blowing to me, but I think that you and we need to go out there and investigate.
Well, yeah, we can do more. You know, I want to shoot. I want to shoot our film, The Devil's Ranch, actually on the ranch. I'm sure we won't be allowed to do that, but I will ask when the time comes. And if not, maybe we can be very close by, because as we know, there's a very unusual activity. In fact, you know, Terry was told about a guy in Price. I think it was 6 years earlier, 70 or 80 miles the other direction, Price, Utah. What's that? Southwest, where a rancher there had also seen these openings in the sky and craft coming out of them. In fact, he described 4 openings that were all the same distance from each other, which is what Terry and Gwen described, and that happened not far away. So, you know, it's certainly in the area now. Now, it is curious, though, that ridge at the ranch does seem to be the focal point. There's something about that ridge or what's behind it. I don't know what it is. But it definitely seems to be an area where, you know, and again, you have to look at also the Shermans. You know, Terry, once things started happening, Terry was very determined to defend his ranch, and so this is a family who, for 22 months, was very aware of the activity and was always looking for it, because Terry wanted to defend his ranch. So that's why, another reason why this family is having so much contact, and the fact that Terry pretty much was fearless until it came to the the blue orbs, wisely so. But I think that's why, a lot of people might have lived out there, and I'm sure it's possible for people to have lived on the ranch and nothing happened, because you got to be looking for it. I mean, there were 3 or 4 months where nothing happened, but because they have cows out there, and I don't know, maybe when the 2 women were living there, maybe there were no cows at the time, so maybe there was no reason for it. But because the cows definitely are something they're interested in. And I wanted to mention something else real quick, because Ted was talking about how, we were talking earlier about how once NIDS got on there, things kind of shut down, or when it appeared that things were being watched. But I wanted to relate something that it is in the book, but it's interesting because it happened in late 97 after NIDS was already there. But there was a period for whatever time that the 2 NIDS researchers were not there. They left. But Terry was still caretaking the ranch, even though they were living elsewhere. And so Terry came on the ranch and with his son and Gwen, and they had an issue. It was about 8 hours long. Basically, what had happened is the cattle were stampeding. They couldn't figure out why. They stampeded over a fence. They were in the alfalfa field. If they eat the alfalfa, they're going to bloat. They're going to die. It was just a bizarre thing. And they finally saw these small red lights. Well, there was one in particular that seemed to be kind of herding the cattle and freaking them out. And it was trying to push the cattle down towards the river. And Terry and his son and Gwen, and I think the nephew may have been involved, they were all trying to push the cattle back up. And it was like a 9 or 10 hour ordeal. And they clearly saw the red balls. Gwen saw the red ball over her son's head as he was coming back from the pasture. And all of that happened when the NIDS people were not there. So was that coincidence? I mean, someone was there. The Shermans were there, but not the NIDS researchers. So, and there's also thought, too, that maybe some people, like John Alexander talked about this, too, with regard to the NIDS researcher, that some people are sensitive to it, and some people seem to be more connected, and that's definitely something I've observed. I'm not one of those, but I think that's because I'm meant to report and relay the information from people like that. But I've certainly met those people, and and I'm an astrologer, too, so I wonder if we could just get people, all the Pisces, people with tons of water signs and water energy, and get them out there, all the Pisces people who are very intuitive and tuned in, and see what happens.
Absolutely. And oh my God, and that would be so great. And I have to ask you, do you think that Bigelow is still involved in the ranch?
Well, yeah, I mean, he still owns it, right? I mean, yeah, I don't think he's going to let go of it. I think if something happens, he'll have people on there in a heartbeat. You bet. I mean, unless something has changed with regard to, as Ted talked about, government contracts and everything. But I'm sure no matter what, that he would hold on to that. I cannot imagine him ever letting go of it.
And do you think that, because I had heard rumors that the CIA was actually on the property doing research for a few years, can you substantiate that? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, not at all. Now, are they saying after NIDS, or are they saying that the CIA was involved with them? Yeah. No, I mean, I could go either way on that. I could say there was absolutely no involvement, and I can also see how there would be. I mean, John Alexander worked for Lannel. He was a remote viewer. I mean, they certainly have government contacts. So don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. And in some ways, I would hope that some aspect of our government is involved with it. You would think that if there are government elements that don't know what's going on, that they would be very curious and interested. If they do know what's going on, and they, then they're not going to do anything, because they're probably bought into denial. So or unless it's part of that government that is denying everything, and it's on the secret, and that's why they're being secretive too, because maybe they are working with the government. Maybe it's this private entity and the government are together trying to figure out what to do. Who knows? But there's certainly something larger. I mean, there are beings who understand what we're doing, perhaps can even read our thoughts. That was my thought too when Ted was talking. And there's lots of evidence of that. It's just, look, we're not the only life. I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm telling you, there's tons of it out there, and they do strange things because they're different from us. And who knows what they need? Who knows what they eat? Who knows? Are there species out there that are not able to reproduce? Well, if that's the case, if it were us, what would we do? If we had the technology to go to another planet and harvest some sort of genetic material that would help us survive, wouldn't we do that? And would we tell those people that we're doing that? Probably not. We might go to the government, and the government might say, oh gosh, that's going to freak everybody out. So let's just keep it a secret, especially if they say we're going to do it anyway. I don't know.
So many deep and complex thoughts, but I just want to say thank you. I knew this was going to be a killer interview, and what an honor to be talking to somebody who really helped us in Utah and all over the world appreciate the importance of a very, very special place. special, frightening, and you've done so many other things. And talk a little bit, we've got one more minute before the show closes, but talk about the Shenandoah experiment. Where can people find you and donate?
All right, thank you very much. Yes, Indiegogo, it's the Shenandoah experiment. You can go directly to igg.me/AT/29LEO. It's the Shenandoah experiment. What we're trying to do, Erica, is we're making a fictional film in Virginia on a low budget because we can shoot it there, but we have all of the elements from the Sherman Ranch, many of them there. Certainly the blue orbs are there, and not to give it all away, but in our script, basically the blue orbs were left behind by time travelers to protect the way home, if you will. And so no one knows why they're there, but basically anyone who time travels in the area of the vortex is subject to attack from the orbs, okay? And nobody understands why. So it's kind of, we don't understand why they're on the Sherman Ranch either. But I think if we give exposure to this and we have dialogue about it, because the blue orbs are something that are still not that common in ufology, not that many people are talking about it because, it's not isolated to the Sherman Ranch, but there are only a few other cases and mentions that I've ever heard of, although I'd like to do more research. But to me, that's the most significant thing in the case.
Well, I'm going to have you back on the show, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and good luck, and I will keep pumping your project. I'm Erica Lukes here on KCOR. Stick around for a fabulous night of ladies. I will catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just